Scott Levy's definition of grit is simple and powerful. It's the ability to keep going and betting on yourself and your team, even when you can find plenty of reasons to stop. Scott's one of my good friends. He was episode 3, shares with us how he started Result Map when he was managing 2 young kids, a lot of demanding clients, me being one of them, and juggling distributed teams. And so he came up with a platform that helps founders keep everybody on the same page, build better habits, and grow their companies. He also shares with us the story about his grandfather coming over to America at the age of 15 with nothing, never seeing his mother again, and that shapes how he thinks about adversity. He's also very big working with the special operator veteran community through an organization called Warrior Rising. So whether you're looking to build a better team, find your vision, or push through a hard season, Scott's perspective is well worth your time. So I hope you can listen into this week's episode of The Grit Mindset.
Hello, I'm Matt Rosen, and welcome to The Grit Mindset with Matt Rosen, your host. I've got a special guest with me today, a gentleman I've known for over 20 years. As I was starting my career, he was part of a networking group with me and was a founder of his own company. And as I was starting my professional services firm, he was a constant inspiration and took a phone call or had a beer with me whenever I need to talk about things. So I'd like to welcome to the show Scott Levy with Result Maps.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, Scott, thanks for jumping on. I appreciate you coming on my show as I'm launching this podcast. Welcome to episode number 3. So we're going to be talking about grit mindset and really hoping to inspire the audience that's listening with your story. So, let's just jump right in and start with kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, your organization to start, and then we'll get into the questions.
Yeah, so Result Maps is my company. We provide software and coaching that helps founders, leaders, and their teams get everyone aligned and on the same page, getting daily wins, and help them auto-scale their companies. That's the quick basics of it.
That's awesome. So you get to work with a lot of entrepreneurs on their journeys and see what they're going through and give them tools to help enable their success.
Exactly.
That's awesome. So let's start with share a little bit about your early life and really the experiences that helped you get where you are today.
100%. My father was actually an entrepreneur. He started 4 businesses, 3 of which did well and he was able to sell, one of which was I won't say it was an abysmal failure, but it was definitely a failure. And that, I didn't think of that as I was growing up and how much that was affecting me, but very much affected my career path. And then on top of that, both my grandfathers were entrepreneurs. Several of my cousins and uncles were entrepreneurs. So it was very much something that once I decided to take the leap, felt very familiar.
That's cool. What type of businesses was he into?
Scrap, trash, and a landfill. And the landfill was actually environmentally friendly. Before that was a thing, that was the one that failed.
Very cool. Well, we're always going to have lots of scrap and trash. So
Yep.
Good businesses to be in. Well, cool. So we're obviously on the grit mindset. That's the name of the show. And grit means something a little different to everyone. So what does it mean to you, both personally and professionally?
I think for me, it's the ability to keep going and persevere and bet on what you're doing, the people that you've got working with you, even when there are reasons you can find to stop. I think that's really the big thing, and that's definitely something I've learned from my father and a lot of my other mentors.
Well, it's cool you had some great role models like that. But as you were on your journey, what would you say is a defining moment that really tested your grit and determination?
Well, there's one, we were actually working together at the time, although hopefully you don't know about it because I was just delivering like crazy. We were actually working together. I was doing a project with you and with another, with another friend of ours, John Humphrey. And at the time I had teams all over the world. This was before it was acceptable to have distributed teams. 2 small kids that were with me half the time, trying to be present for them, make sure we're hitting our deliverables and getting our teams on track. And ultimately ended up having to work through like what was taking the most time. How could we optimize? How could we make sure that we were showing up just with everything blowing away, creating wows, if you remember, for the clients, and balance all of these factors. And ultimately, the interesting part about it is, as hard as that was, it was the genesis of what's now Result Maps, because we had to look for what was really taking our team off track, what was when we got off track. How could we, even though we were always finding ways to get back on track, how could we minimize the times that we were misaligned and ensure that we were just delivering at a very, very high level? Because I always remember one of these clients we went into together, you just said, look, man, you're in, don't F it up. Although it was more colorful language. And I really appreciated that. It was taking a bet on me at the time. But yeah, definitely the time required and balancing that with two small sons and really being committed to being present in their lives, and then trying to prove out this distributed model when they're at that point in time, people weren't really doing it.
Yeah, everyone wanted their consultants on site, and we had very demanding clients that we served together that wanted a wow experience when they logged into their software. And well, you were able to deliver it, and I didn't know all that was brewing behind the scenes. So that's a great example of grit, because you came, you delivered, those clients continue to do business with me. Some are still clients today, and
Some are relations today. Now that I think about it,
today they are. And now
Very
we
cool.
work in a distributed model, so we did that before it was cool.
yes, definitely.
Well, that's awesome. No, thanks for sharing that. And those are some great client success stories we had together. What I'd be curious is, you talked about your entrepreneurial upbringing, your grandparents, your dad. How does that really influence your approach when you're faced with a setback or a challenge?
So I'll take it even farther back than that. So my grandfather came to the U.S. as a teenager. And the story I knew from the time I grew up. Like, his mother said goodbye to her 15 and 16-year-old sons. They're about a year and a half, I think, or 2 years apart. Put them on a ship in Latvia.
Wow.
Kissed them goodbye. Never saw them again.
That's crazy.
He was a tailor's apprentice. Ended up apprenticing an uncle of his in the pipe business. Did incredibly well. Parlayed that into mineral rights holdings. Did incredibly well. And when he passed away, I just remember for years, people would come up to me and say, I knew your grandfather. He did this for me. They'd have all these stories. So when you have that as a role model, there's not a lot of excuses that are okay. It's like you know what success looks like. And no matter what you see around you, you know that it's possible to make things happen. So that, combined with, my father from early on was very much a believer in growth mindset, again, before it was a thing. So if I wanted to learn something, he was like, look, get a vision for yourself, work backwards and figure out what skills you have to learn. And when I first got into the corporate world, that was a massive advantage for me. I was surprised that everyone had learned these things. I didn't realize how unique they were to me, but it translated to me rising much more quickly than my peers, and ultimately going out on my own and through a series of events. But that mindset was given to me. So I'm always very passionate about how can I help other people cultivate that mindset, because there's so much wealth you can get from it.
Yeah, that's amazing what your grandfather went through. My great-grandparents came over to this country, said goodbye to their family, started with nothing in New York, so some of that did trickle down. So those generations went through some things that we'd never quite seen, and
100%.
It had an influence on folks like you and me. But oftentimes, we've got teams who haven't been through that. So when faced with that, how do you foster that same grit and resilience within a team or organization that maybe didn't have those shaping and forming experiences like you went through?
I think everybody has the seeds of it in their lives. We don't always have the role models in front of us, but it's giving people the clarity about how to be successful. And that's something we do a lot with our clients. Like, how do we define success in a way that it's crystal clear and it's very simple for them to remember? And then how do we set them up with rhythms and habits where it becomes simpler for them? I won't say easy, but we remove the friction. How do you remove the friction from them self-assessing and understanding where they need to improve so they can really own that improvement? Because once we experience the improvement, it's addictive.
Yeah, it's creating that habit.
Exactly.
That probably takes some time and discipline, but once it's there, it's there.
Yep, that's it.
Oh, that's cool. So obviously you've been an entrepreneur on your own for a while and been building result maps for a good bit, and it's kind of taken some twists and turns, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But what practices did you share that help you maintain kind of a strong and positive mindset, really help you maintain your grit?
The habits are a big deal. That's been one of the most freeing things. Is, I evaluate on a weekly basis, and our teams evaluate on a weekly basis what went well, what didn't go well.
Yeah.
And we try to double down on what went well.
Yeah.
And try to understand, do we need to adapt something if it didn't go well, or do we need to change something if it did go well? And then you move on to the next week, and you're doing that on a weekly basis. And then on a daily basis, we look at the end of every day, what I accomplish,
Yeah.
what's the one most important thing for me to work on next, and is anything blocking me where I need to seek help? So that's sort of a core, not sort of, it's very definitely the core practice that's helped me, that's in Result Maps, that helps all the teams we work with and our people. And when you have that structure, it's as certain as a clock, right? So it's happening all the time. So then you can overlay on top of that things like, well, let's look at our month.
Yeah.
And let's now put the same habit in on a quarterly basis. So you're just continually improving. Whereas I think we're taught, at least, our age, I don't know if it's still going on, but in school it's like, did you make an A? Did you not make an A? Versus, did you make an, mastery-based approach of, are we there yet? What do we need to do to get there?
Yeah.
What do we need to do to get there? And that, I think, is where grit comes in, because if you're always focusing on improving and moving toward that target and celebrating your wins and improving what didn't go well, it's much easier to keep going and through the twists and turns.
Yeah, it's unfortunately, I think our education system does us a little bit of disservice being so binary versus like, yeah, you might have gotten a B, but are you moving towards an A as you go? And so given, the fact that you are preaching to other entrepreneurs how to achieve their goals, what are some of the goals that you have currently, and where do you see Result Maps in yourself, call it 3 to 5 years from now?
We are trying to help as many entrepreneurs and leaders as possible, and through them, their teams and their companies, understand these concepts, get these practices in place so that they're achieving profitable growth and ultimately using that to make broader impact on their lives, their families, their communities. Really ties back to what I said about my father and my grandfather. I grew up thinking what an entrepreneur was very different from how a lot of people portray it. I thought it meant you create a business that, that does a good for your community. You use that money to provide for your family, and very intentionally for the betterment of your community.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most powerful ways that I can do that is by helping leaders who are leading other people, because they can then spread that on their own to the people they lead.
No, that's awesome. I love the mission behind it. And as you're kind of talking with these leaders, you're providing them both some consulting as well as a platform. How are you showing them how to kind of cultivate this culture that's goal-oriented, but encourages both resilience and perseverance?
We go through a series of 12 very specific steps. So it's 3 main pillars that it's organized into that really resonate with most leaders and founders. The things we hear the most as problems and challenges are, hey, I feel like we're going in 1,000 different directions. Things are really scattered. I feel like we're on hamster wheels. I'm working harder, my team's working harder, but we're not getting the results we want. And then we hear, well, this won't scale. And so we replace each of those problems with very specific solutions. The problem of scatter we fix by showing them exactly how to get people rowing in exactly the same direction. 3 very specific steps they go through. And as they're going through those first steps, there's ahas that are happening. There's wows that they're experiencing, because it's simpler than it's often made. Once we have that in place to get them off their hamster wheels, we're able to put these ways of working as a team, which we're not really taught very well. Nobody studies teamwork. I'm still fascinated by the fact that with all the great college football teams, very few universities offer a way to take the learnings that you get on a great football team, and you don't get a degree or a credit even from that. It's like a P credit, I think. I don't know that much about it, but I always think, man, if you got to play under Steve Sarkisian, or whoever that new great coach is for the Aggie, or whomever, right?
We don't like
you're
him,
learning about
he had a winning culture, so
you're learning about how to create a culture and a mindset and all those things. But if you're not in an environment like that, or you don't serve in the military or someplace that really cultivates leadership and teamwork, you don't learn how to work as a team.
yeah.
So where I'm going with that slight digression is, we really focus on, here's some essentials. Here are the practices you need, and here are the ways and the tools to think about working together. And again, this creates momentum and ahas for people, because it's all in here. We all understand it, but so much stuff gets in the way. So we're just moving those things out, honing the techniques, offering some new tools. And then that sets up, when you combine that with rhythms, it sets companies up to scale themselves. And there's more nuances than that, but at a high level, that's how we go through it.
Yeah, no, I get it. No, Sark did a great job this year. Jury's still out on Elko. We'll see how he does. We've got to give him a little time.
I'm nervous about him.
That's good. Hopefully the rest of Texas is as well. I've got a house divided as well at home because my wife's a big Longhorn fan. So
Speaks of good character.
Yeah, it does. So talk about some of your habits. You've talked about the habits you're instilling in these different CEOs and their organizations, but like personally, what are some of the daily habits you have that contribute to your resilience and success in life?
The biggest one that unlocked things for me, growing up with that grit. Grit can take you into overdrive when you're just willing to work to get results. And I've seen that in a lot of clients of mine as well. I shifted my sleep habits. So I wake up early. For years I was an insomniac. I got it done late. And then when you have teams in the Philippines and Australia and India, you start to be online at those hours. So we put practices in place that allow me to go to bed very early, wake up by 4:30 or 5, and now I have quiet time when my brain is at peak state. So our brains work best about 30 minutes to 90 minutes after we wake up. Well, that's a whole topic I can go deep into, but that's the science. And it starts to taper off as it burns glucose over about 3 hours.
Interesting.
So unlocking that time period with time I have very focused on my most important problems is very critical. Sometimes that might be meeting with the team. Sometimes that might be writing. Sometimes whatever the current most important thing for me is, gets that time.
Get it done early.
Get it done early. That gives me time to make sure I finish up early so that I have family time in the evenings. And then I've become religious about going to bed. But that waking up early, and then I've got a set of habits I go through. There's reading. For me, there's a really super simple form of prayer I do. I know a lot of people use this time for a practice similar to that. There's a set of affirmations I do. Just to literally, the way I look at affirmations is we've got thoughts going through our brain all day. If we don't become intentional about those thoughts, you get all kinds of trash up there.
Yeah, thoughts are things.
So I program those in, get my workout in, check in with what our team, like we've got a shared channel where everybody's submitting what got done, what's next, what's blocked with videos. Usually look at that, see how things are going. And depending on the day of the week, it's either jumping into client meetings, marketing activities, sales activities. But yeah, at about somewhere between 5:30 and 6 every day, cut it, have some family time, and
that's awesome.
Keep cycling.
Thanks for sharing all that you go through at that detailed level. I think that's really helpful for our listeners. This might be a shameless plug for Result Maps, but what are the tools or technologies you rely on to stay organized and focused?
So it's I talked about that difficult moment or that challenging moment when we were working together before Result Maps started. That's where we started building the software platform that became Result Maps. So it is the way. The idea is what I noticed going in on these projects, and for anybody listening that doesn't know Matt, we've between us worked with, I'd say, some of the best project managers in the world.
Yeah, definitely.
What I noticed was there's always new shiny project tools. There's always cooler ways to push tasks around. The best project managers, many of whom I met through you, I could give personal plugs, but anyway, the best were going and creating their own dashboards. They were taking it out of the tools and creating a very specific way of looking at where the projects were, what changes we had to make in order to meet business goals. So we started making a tool set out of that. Like, how could we just plug that into our process early, and that became Result Maps. Very cool. So it keeps us on our rhythms, keeps me on my rhythms, and keeps us from getting lost in the taskademic, as I call it.
Yeah, we can give a shout out to a few. Jessica Zetterholm.
I was going to mention Jessica.
Brett Grosner, Charles Knight.
Yep. Richard Ewers.
Richard Ewers, good crew of people.
That
we used to work with, so we'll have to tag them. Switch gears a little bit. Would love to hear kind of an inspiring story that affected your perspective on grit and determination.
I think I'd like to give you two.
Two sounds
Sounds great.
Okay, so the first is in my very first business, the one through which we met back when I had Penn Atlantic Software. Going through some different challenges, and I talked to my father, and I was kind of whining. Like I didn't intend to whine, but he was like, when I had the landfill, so basically he got bilked by a company that sold him bad materials, so like some of the equipment they needed. They sued him, they won, the company declared bankruptcy, and my dad lost everything. At the time, built himself back. But he's like, man, I used to go into my office and just put my head down on the desk. And he was sharing with me like things when I was in my late 20s that I didn't know when I was a kid. I was like, this guy was at every practice. He was at every game. He woke up at 4 a.m. every day. Like, I never had any idea that was going on. And it really made me understand like just how hard he had to work to do the things he did. So that was really inspiring to me.
Yeah, sounds like an amazing guy.
He was an amazing guy. He was the quietest guy. Like so quiet. He wasn't somebody who would like introduce himself with his businesses. It took me a while to understand the success he'd achieved. So that was one. The second one is I worked for about a year with a nonprofit called Warrior Rising, started by Jason Van Camp. Actually, I'm talking to their COO right after this. But they're an organization that gives veterans who've served, when they're coming into civilian life, gives them a way to launch their own businesses. And they've got these 3 programs. I won't go into all the details of it here, but you should look them up. But I served as their head coach, and one of my jobs was to interview potential coaches. And I thought I'd be getting a lot of people from the business world, and I did. But a lot of them were vets who had been super successful and were looking for more ways to give back.
What a great cause.
And
That's awesome.
it was shocking though. I would talk to these people who had multiple business successes at a very high level. And they were still looking for ways to serve others. They're still looking for ways to serve others. I want to help more people. So mission driven. It's very humbling when you see both that this is 1% of our population that raises their hand and signs a blank check.
Yeah.
Then they come back, and sometimes, it's certainly not a soft landing for people coming out of the military.
Not at all.
And to do that, and then to be successful in one business, and then multiple, and then still be hungry to give more. It was super, super humbling and super inspiring.
Yeah. No, thank goodness for our military and all they do to protect our freedoms to do what we do. So it's awesome you're able to help them out. So
That's about them, though. I need to say that. Like, for me, it was such a pleasure and an honor. Like, I got way more from that than I gave.
yeah, well, that's a very cool experience. Thanks for sharing those stories. So we're running out of time here. Any questions I didn't ask that or things you'd like to talk about? Otherwise, we'll kind of close out here in a second.
So one of the things I got to do through Warrior Rising is meet somebody who's a role model of mine, General Stanley McChrystal. So he's written a fantastic book with his team called Team of Teams.
Yeah, it's an awesome book. I've read it.
Wonderful book, followed up by Chris Fussell, who was his aide-de-camp and now COO, I think he's the COO if he's not CEO now of the McChrystal Group. Wrote a book called One Mission, and those had a massive impact on me. So I got to meet him at one of the Warrior Rising events, just briefly. I can't think of a more humble human. The way he spoke to me, but then every single vet, every question that came up, and not every question was a savvy question.
Yeah.
Some of them I would have been challenged to answer. I would have probably dismissed, and he first thanked the person for their service and just so much humility. And what was shocking to me is being around so many entrepreneurs, not my clients, but some have been around, there can be a lot of ego. There's a lot of bluster sometimes. Here's what I've accomplished. Here's what I've accomplished. Whether it was General McChrystal or working with Jason Van Camp, who founded Warrior Rising, so much humility. When these guys approach leadership, they're not, first of all, they're fantastic leaders. And there's a ton of grit, because you don't make the special forces without it. But the last thing that really impressed me was they didn't treat leadership as this magical ability. They just treated it as a skill and a responsibility they had. Was super impactful for me.
No, that's pretty amazing because I mean it was his team strategy that changed the tide on the Iraq War. So it's really cool that he's a humble guy and down to earth. And
it was pretty cool that he was there because Jason, who was a commander, like it said a lot to me about Jason's respect for him coming out. You know, you meet people in companies sometimes where, you know, a leader doesn't really respect the leader at the very top, but it was very clear, like watching the rapport and the fact that he had invited him in, and then the fact that he came and just like took time off of a vacation to come speak to this group of vets was pretty cool.
Yeah, it sounds like an awesome organization. Let's make sure we tag it and have our listeners check it out. So
100%.
Final message you'd like to share with our listeners about developing grit?
You can do it. I think the most important thing I've seen is get your vision clear, understand what you want to achieve and why it's important to you, and don't let fear or the different things that can pop into your mind discourage you from really getting to the core of why it's important to you. When you have that clear vision of the future you want to create and why it's important to you and the values that you want to live, it's much easier to roll with whatever happens and push against it when you need to and have the grit. I think for me, that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, well, awesome final message. Well, Scott, thanks for being the third guest on the show. Thanks for being my friend through thick and thin.
Likewise.
Been awesome working with you over the years and continuing the relationship and seeing where you and Result Maps take things. So hopefully for our listeners, they took some good nuggets away. You had some great inspiring stories, some great, very tactical things to take away. So with that, we're going to wrap up episode 3 of The Grit Mindset with Matt Rosen. Have a great day.
Cheers. Appreciate being here.
Stay gritty.